tariffs, changing regulations, PFAS concerns. When factors such as these wreck your supply chain, how do you find the perfect supplier? In today's episode, we're unveiling the unexpected challenges companies face when searching for new suppliers and how AI is transforming every step of the process from compliance to capacity checks. Today, Marija and Daniel from PreScouter, who have led several hundreds of these types of projects with brands you know very well, will show us how to stay ahead of the game, cut through the noise, and build more resilient supply chains.
Reasons why organizations look for new suppliers.
When I was thinking about this, specific to CPG and on what's changed over the last few years, I came up with 5 buckets. I'm curious to see if they complement with what Marija's seen in her space. But work in supply chain bolstering, and what I mean by that is if you're dependent on one supplier, can you leverage a research service or consultancy like ours to find other suppliers that meet your criteria? Then there's the legislation or regulation-led supplier identification. And typically this has a geographic specific focus depending on where our clients source from or where they're manufacturing. There's also product reformulation. So perhaps you want to move away from PFAS chemistries in a coating or silicones in a cosmetic. Then we have the packaging side. So alternative packaging suppliers, whether that's within the realm of sustainability, monomaterials, barrier coatings that can be applied to paper-based packaging that are more sustainable than conventional plastics. Also, sometimes working with folks on premium designs, which is fun, more from an aesthetic perspective and looking at trends in other industries that could be applied to packaging in their specific industry. CapEx acquirement or co-manufacturing when folks are entering maybe a new manufacturing process or developing a new product that requires new equipment. And lastly, I'll end on maybe, I went back and forth if it fits here, but assisting folks when they're trying to transition to a new software, whether that's product lifecycle management, or regulatory or compliance software, and then leveraging a service such as ours to ensure it works with existing infrastructure at the company or can adapt to changes in the future.
Low carbon raw materials case study.
So what the client wanted us to do was really find low carbon alternatives for the raw materials that they're purchasing in really greater quantities. So we were really looking at the basic building blocks, and they wanted us to find something that would be an exact replacement, but also in cases for some building blocks where we cannot really find that exact match, what would be the closest option? So you can imagine by that kind of the scope of it was pretty large, and we were able to identify in total more than 100 solutions, and most of them, let's say 90% of them, were really commercial products already, which I think was also something that did surprise us, that there were a lot of solutions already in the market. And through that we were also able to find more longer term solutions too. So something that was not really commercially available, but it was available through pilot plans or in some cases patents or kind of early processes. So it was an interesting study, and it basically went directly from us to the client's procurement team.
Adapting to market shifts and supplier needs.
Thinking of shifts, how shifts in market conditions have influenced the types of projects we've worked on and helping with supplier identification. And I think I brought this point up already. First, we start with the understanding the where the product's manufactured and then what the end market is. And in some cases, our clients may already have a pain point on we've been business as usual selling into X country and something's emerged and we need this solved right away. So those are the more immediate, what can we find, right away to solve this challenge. Other cases, it could be um, i- impending legislation or sometimes consumer insights that whether they've gained internally or are seeing from their competitors. So they're preparing to make those shifts. And then it can also be product driven. So, for example, with commodity nonwovens, um, they're they're very sensitive to any changes in cost and availability. So when working with those clients, it's uh, sometimes more of a race to understand which geographies can um, match their needs with the same products they could get somewhere else, but it's more of understanding cost and capacity versus understanding suppliers with a new functionality or new material. I've also seen with material microplastics and nanoparticles, for example, materials that don't have concrete regulations in different geographies. So there are standards, but they're not specifically defined. How do we help suppliers navigate if they were to acquire material from these companies that they match our clients' internal standards? So, um, yeah, so it's a fun game, but those are those are an overview of where we've seen shifts recently and how we've navigated them.
Yeah, I can again maybe emphasize that it really depends on case by case basis, like what really the client is looking for. There are some common things across the board when we're looking for supplies that, of course, everyone is looking into, such as cost and capacity. That is, of course, always important, and like lead time. But it does come down to specific product requirements that they have. And those can easily be like 20 or 30 or more parameters that they are looking into, which we always like to classify into must haves and nice to haves, just so it would be easier to kind of understand where there is a match. But yeah, it is very kind of client dependent.
And yeah, speaking toward that point of the criteria that help folks validate if or as a supplier is aligned with their goals um, outside of the technical parameters that we've discussed, but like sustainability, for instance, does the supplier have the ASTM or ISO standards or certificates to confirm it's bio-based or biodegradable or matches the end of life criteria the client has set? Another resource that is it's harder, more uncommon, but can be very valuable is if a supplier has a case study demonstrating the application of a similar package or formulation component in a similar formulation or similar product type. Um, and from the software validation side, uh, very valuable to connect with implementation consultants that have worked with that software in the past and applied it maybe to a uh, similar scheme or a similar player in the same industry, so they can speak to things such as customer service or willingness to customize their product, and or confirming lead times on adapting new functionalities.
And one thing that we didn't mention, and I think would be important to understand, is like our methodology, how we go about finding those right suppliers. So we do take that kind of wish list from our clients, what they want, what that ideal supplier looks like. And then our initial search focuses on like secondary or publicly available data. We aim to find like as many that seem to be a fit based on those requirements. And after that, the kind of first pass, going back to like how do we select which one is the best one, the next pass is actually contacting suppliers, and we typically do this anonymously, to verify the information that we found and then to collect additional information that typically is not available readily, and like price and capacity, which are the two very important factors there, are typically not something that's publicly accessible. So that is what we then confirm through those interviews. And then we also like ask, there always some additional clarifying questions in addition to technical specifications too, such as related to certifications, right? Because very often like, they do mention some certifications, but then in conversation we really want to clarify and confirm those certifications, or if we are looking to understanding like those technical specifications more, then maybe we want to understand what testing methodologies were used to get to those numbers. So things like that are further clarified. And this naturally narrows down the initial scope. The last part of it is actually because, you know, there is always like that big wish list, but rarely one would find everything that is on the wish list. We do develop like a scoring kind of form that we use to evaluate these suppliers based on all of that information that we are finding. And then through that scoring and also conversations with our clients, we do narrow down to like top, typically like 3 to 5 suppliers that we do recommend.
Supplier claim validation methods.
Well, typically it's from primary outreach, and that's really framing, you know, what we're looking for from a supplier, or do they have existing certifications that they can share, or alternatively, outside of, sometimes you want to ensure objectively that suppliers not just saying yes to every question that you've asked. And so that's where it's really important to find subject matter experts in that space, whether it's an implementation consultant, someone who is well versed in, spends every day focused on looking at procurement trends in a specific category, whether that's packaging or a product type. And so we can leverage talking to those folks to validate the answers we get from primary research directly with suppliers.
Yeah, and there's also like one additional thing that can be done, and that is potential sample procurement as well, which is I think especially relevant, yeah, when, you know, as Daniel said, like you get yes to everything. This is very often the case like for startups that are really eager to like develop new products, and they do think that what they're developing is an answer to everything. We then ask for samples that our clients can test in their own facilities and really see if they're matching those that the provider is claiming. And in some cases, we will actually find out that they are, or in some cases that, you know, there are some restrictions to those initial claims.
What kind of questions do you ask of the maybe kind of experts who worked with these suppliers, or even the suppliers themselves, to kind of get at that sort of insight as to their reliability and credibility?
There could be cases where it's that what trustworthiness, are they aware of their working relationships with other companies, even if they don't name the companies. Again, to understand well, whether they've had legal battles or what the perception of that supplier is to other folks. That can be really important. Then, from a more tactical perspective, if they're familiar with these suppliers, um, what their lead times are, how they adapt to changes in maybe supply of a material or supply of a product. So that I guess we could lump this under really customer service, and or other times too, it could be understanding the breadth of their supply chain, whether that's identifying or understanding where locations they have and where they're actually able to supply to. Um, yeah, I think that rounds out. Are also sometimes asking what a clear cost expectation could be versus the cost that maybe you get from that supplier. That's obviously can be volume dependent, but that type of information can be a big win if you've gathered those insights from experts outside of the supplier space.
Remember, folks, when you're switching suppliers, there's always a chance those new partners could let you down spectacularly, like a surprise birthday party, except no one shows up and the cake is made of existential dread.
Wow, Mini D, you really know how to set the mood. Fortunately, we've seen that with the right strategy, these AI-enabled supplier solutions can be really transformative. You can find out more about tactics and insights such as these in our newsletter linked in the description. The type of things that will really help you thrive in a changing landscape. Let's get back to Daniel and Marija.
How is AI optimizing supplier searches?
As we've integrated into our processes, I've bucketed. There's been easy wins, and then there's nice to haves where I could see AI being leveraged to both save time and connect the dots across different challenges we've seen in this space. So, it was a first pass leveraging AI tools to combine the disparate data sources that we look at to identify potential suppliers, whether that's for a specific material, component, formulation. I would call that this leveraging automation to help increase the speed of down selecting potential suppliers. And then when working with clients, understanding maybe if there are geopolitical factors that we should be mindful of in terms of where they ship or where they supply from, or understanding market trends and geographies so we can connect the dots between the production of a certain material being less prevalent or less available in a different geography versus where it was before, and then connecting the dots to leverage AI to provide more of a risk assessment. Because today the right supplier may make sense, but how can we predict if it may not be a good fit in the next 5 or 10 years? So then we can create kind of a supplier implementation roadmap. On regulatory compliance, the ability to take the disparate legislation and regulatory statements across geographies and to quickly analyze them and pull out key insights been a huge win. I'll pause there. I don't want to dominate the convo here, Marija, but I'm curious what you've seen as well.
No, those are really, really great points. Like kind of thinking more from, let's say, like a broader perspective of finding suppliers and thinking about suppliers in the future, and that's a very, very interesting and valid thought. Like kind of like a strategy-driven thinking when it comes to thinking about the supply chain. It can be also like very much like operational, I would say, kind of every day. So in many cases on our projects, we do have to identify like large number of suppliers, like more than 200 suppliers, and really profile them in detail. And that is a lot of, manual work. And this is where AI can really help, like in extracting data, in analyzing the data. But it does have to work in conjunction with human analysis still. So it can really help like the process. It can also like streamline by kind of transcribing and summarizing interviews that are being held with suppliers. So in both cases here, like really helping speed up the process, and yeah, basically get to the results faster.
How can AI results be verified?
So you still need, as I said, like that human intelligence, right? And I think the tools are getting better and better with time. So it's definitely important to keep up to speed with those. But you do need to have a human intelligence doing the QA afterwards, just to make sure that everything is sound, because mistakes can occur still every now and then.
Interesting idea I just had too, because we've talked about, as AI grows, the protecting and privatizing the unique data you have is becoming more important. But this might be an interesting case where what we found is if you leverage, AI is only as good as the publicly available information. So it's actually the better that a supplier's website describes the capabilities they have and the metrics of their products, whether that's a chemistry, the easier it can help folks find the right suppliers. So the interesting point there, because that's really it does work great, but you still find that you'll miss great potential partners just because the data that's available to identify them wasn't available. And many times those are kind of the nuggets of information we can provide to our clients that we learn from an interview with a human in this space that knows a supplier that we wouldn't have found. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why the interview part of the process is really important, because sometimes there you discover things that were not clear or not even mentioned on like through the publicly available resources such as web pages.
Continuous monitoring and legacy opportunities.
yeah, two points, and I guess they're on the opposite of the opportunity to leverage legacy data in a way we haven't been able to before. So I've seen this with clients, whether it's analog data, lab notebooks, or a Rolodex of previous suppliers and their capabilities that was written down or typed in a computer. So AI, now you can commoditize that data to the company and query it. Sometimes maybe there's a supplier that your company's already worked with that data was just lost when someone left the company. So I think there's a huge opportunity with interrogating legacy data. And then on the continuous monitoring aspect, once you have these systems set in place with the right AI tools, then they can be the automation of incoming data can be automated, and it allows companies to stay up to date and near real time. So two parting thoughts there I have.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you, Daniel. Basically the use of much more data than what is being used now to identify not like current opportunities but also like future opportunities, and really making those decisions as then strategic and as targeted and as much data driven, um, would probably be the future.